I'm William Shatner. I've done a lot of things in my career, but this takes the cake. This is so cool. You, Joseph, today, it's all about you. You won the internet. Congratulations. It's exciting. It makes me want to celebrate. Makes me want to get up out of this chair. Makes me want to sing. Makes me want to dance. Makes me want to shout. Kick my heels up. Throw my hands up. Toss my head back. No, really, people should be shouting your name in the street.
Come on now. Sing
that song.
Joseph,
Sing it out loud.
Joseph.
I want to celebrate. Put it up in lights. See, no one else deserves to be celebrated like you because you are the best.
Hey, listen up, y'all. I'm going to shout out this young gun right here because he's trying to do his thing. Joseph JAFFE, not famous. Probably rightfully so, you know what I'm saying? I mean, I'm famous because, you know, he not famous and he like, yo, let me call my famous friends and see if they'll shout me out and make me more famous, sir. Right? But so, you know, Joseph JAFFE, man, it's cool. You got your late night talk show popping off. That's what's dope. Streaming, been doing your thing, man. Started this in March of the 2020, which is, tough throughout the years, but booking great guests, man. Jamal Mashboard, James Rollins, steady building it, man. Keep it popping off, man. Keep building your brand, man. Believe in yourself. Keep going hard, all right? That's what it's all about. One of these days, this little acronym of yours, not famous, is not going to be true. People going to see you in the mall and be like, I know who you is. Them going to be your cousins saying it all incorrect like that. But you know what I'm saying? You know what you going to do. What you going to do? They family. All right, bro. I'll holler.
Woody-hoo!
Woody-hoo! Out here in the stream, as in the streaming era, I fight for my dreams. I get my heart into my living.
You encourage drinking or marijuana use on the show?
I don't need a fight, cause Evelyn's right. Or you could sponsor an emu. I'm Batman.
That's your tweetable moment, folks. That's your tweetable moment. If Mark Zuckerberg makes a metaverse, is that Web3? No, it's Mark Zuckerberg's metaverse.
He's like us. He's flawed.
Just a little segue.
That's some dope shit, dude. That's really, really nice.
Woody-hoo!
Woody-hoo! It is September 14th, 2022. Why is that a significant day or date, you might ask? And my answer might be that it is a day after my son's birthday. Happy birthday, Aaron. Or it is the day of the ETH merge. What the hell does that mean for anyone? I have absolutely no idea. But I do know that today is a big day because this is not an epic fail. This is not a fail whale. This is the day that Dan Faill comes on the show. And let me tell you, the forces conspired against us. Glenn is here. He said, happy to see Joseph today. Let me tell you, you almost didn't, because this has been scheduled and rescheduled and unscheduled and rescheduled. And on top of everything, when I realized that I was going to be here and we were going to do the show, and Dan, by the way, who's sitting in the green room, thank you for your flexibility. On top of everything, I then realized that actually I'd scheduled it for yesterday, but to Dan's miscredit, so did he realize, he didn't realize that it was scheduled for yesterday. So here's the bottom line. We're here today, and then about 5 minutes or 10 minutes ago, Dan was called into a urgent client meeting, and he was like, don't worry, I'll be there on time. And he was there on time. So all's well that ends fail, so to speak. We're going to talk about failure today. We're going to talk about imposter syndrome. We're going to talk about speaking. We're going to talk about things that are going to be valuable to you. How do I know? I just do. I don't know this for a fact. I just know it's true. And so let's get on with the show. A little bit of an update on my little project. Nice little tinkle there. Alpha Collective. You know, I am loving this experiment, this transparent building, community building exercise during ridiculously tough times. But I would tell you that one of the things, we talk about failure, right? Winston Churchill once said, what was that quote? That failure is, no, what did he say? He said, success is jumping from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm. And I can tell you that when you are faced with no's, when you're faced with rejections, when you're faced with what appears to be failure, what you got to do is find the small wins, the small victories, and celebrate them. And one of the things for me is, what are the things, the execution that you can get off the ground? Well, one of them is this collective cafe. And let me tell you, Monday through Friday, 8 to 9 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. This is free. It is free for all. All you have to do, sometimes it's a free for all. You just have to go to discord.gg/Alpha Collective and join in what is, I think, maybe the highlight of my day. Well, second to obviously this show and Dan being on the show. But it's an opportunity to get my day kick-started on the front foot by talking about things that I believe matter. And you know, one of the things that we've been discussing over the last couple of weeks is this idea of wearing segmentation, whether it is a PFP or it's clothing or swag or a tattoo, or how do you wear a brand? How do you wear a community? How do you wear an NFT collection? And one of the ways to actually go about it is actually creating a little bit of IP associated with being able to think about the different groups of people that live inside a community. Well, another thing that we've done is we're launching a book, not just a book, but my 6th book. It is called Forever Change. And what makes this so amazing is the fact that this will be the world's first book that actually offers royalties to readers. The entire book is being powered by the blockchain and by NFTs. And there still is an opportunity. If you actually want to write a little vignette in the book, all you have to do is swing by our coffee in the morning. What we're actually doing is having people tell their pandemic story. Were you changed at all? Were you forever changed? Did you change and slip back? Are you still changing? Do you want to change? How did the last 2.5 years affect you? And of course, everyone that contributes to the book, everyone that even attends coffee discussing the book, including readers, will earn royalties in perpetuity. How cool is that? Well, another thing that I do, as you know, is I give away a little bit of JAFFE coin, and there is the QR code that is live right now. If you own 10 JAFFE coin, if you are verified in the Discord server, you have the opportunity to earn a little bit of cryptocurrency, and it's my way of rewarding people that tune in live. What makes us cool, in my opinion, is the fact that the QR code is only live while the show is live. So even though you may watch this after the fact on demand on your terms, which you're entitled to, it's just something extra special for people that tune in live. It's not just the host, it's not just the guest, it's actually the community, not even the audience, but this little family of people that are part of this live experience, something that I get a real kick out of. Well, another thing that I get a kick out of is the seated soliloquy. And today, the seated soliloquy is called The Hand You're Dealt. I want to start off by actually talking to you a little bit and reading a quote. You know, sometimes I'm not even sure how I find certain tweets, but they get my attention. And this was, I've never met him. I don't know who he is, but Greg Gow at GregGowe. And this is what his pinned tweet says. His pinned tweet says, 2 years ago, before the pandemic started, I was still making my way downtown to work as a lawyer at TELUS, which I assume is in Australia. Today, I'm almost fully immobilized, can't speak, and type with my eyes. These are the cards I've been dealt. It's up to me to define what winning looks like. I loved it. I love that quote. I get goosebumps even just thinking about that quote now. These are the cards I was dealt. This is the hand that I was dealt. It's up to me to define what winning looks like. So why am I even sharing this soliloquy, this particular monologue with you today? Well, for a couple of reasons. One is we'll talk about failure. And the opposite of failure, one would think, is success. But is there sometimes success in failure? And the answer, of course, that's rhetorical. The answer, of course, is yes. But when you can actually define what success looks like and realize that it is different for everyone and different for each and every one of us, and ultimately, if we can find victory in defeat, if we can find success in failure, today we'll talk about the phases of failure. Today we'll learn about adding more commentary, more context, more layers to failure. Then it doesn't matter what hand we're dealt. It matters what we do with that hand. And as anyone knows in poker, they say you don't play the cards, you play your opponent. Now, unfortunately, sometimes victory isn't assured at all. I did see that pinned tweet was dated January 25th, 2022. And I happened to see this tweet dated September 10th, so just a few days ago. It said, from Greg Gow, "My fight with ALS has come to an end. Please don't be sad. Life is beautiful. Live hard, love those around you, and come together to #end ALS." And I'm not really sure whether he wrote that or not, or someone else wrote it for him. But Greg Gow, in your memory, which is a blessing, not may it be a blessing, it is a blessing already. You have inspired me and no doubt countless others. And I'll make sure that I share this soliloquy with you, with your friends, even though we've never met and never will meet. And I know it's a little bit of a kind of not a downer point, but something to celebrate, right? We celebrate life, we celebrate legacy, we celebrate memories. It's now time to celebrate failure. And we'll definitely, don't worry, Dan, I promise you the mood is going to swing. This is a manic depressive experience being on the show. It's now time to welcome him onto the show. I love his bio. Over-involved student leader, fraternity member, advisor, husband, dad, ex-husband, entrepreneur, failure, imposter. Oh, we're going to talk about that in a moment. These are just a few of the titles Dan has had over the course of his life. As an accomplished storyteller and international speaker, Dan incorporates his own lived experiences in addition to blending industry-proven research to craft engaging and relatable experiences for audiences. Having worked for over 15 years in college campuses, advocating for safe and positive student communities, Dan now travels the country and even the globe as a full-time speaker and consultant, engaging audiences in hard but needed conversations. Dan creates spaces that engage and inspire us to be our authentic selves and be brave enough to have the conversations that matter. Let's bring him onto the show. Dan, success. We did it. We did it. We did it.
It made it happen. I love it.
It's incredible. I was going to say it's crazy. It's incredible, crazy.
The journey to make this happen has been wild. And so I'm glad that we have been at least able to give each other some grace when it comes to like, hey, can we move? I don't know if I am able to move into my house. Well, my house isn't ready. Well, we had it as yesterday. And so if anything, it was a great exercise in just the ability to be flexible. So I appreciate that with you and everybody.
Well, and it takes two parties to be flexible, right? It doesn't matter if one is flexible and the other is inflexible. It really takes meeting in the middle. And it was, you give yourself grace, but you gave me grace. And it was much appreciated because it involved a rescheduled trip to South Africa. It involved the house not being ready. It's coming up on 5 months that we've essentially been displaced, which is kind of crazy. And then it involved apparently yesterday, which came and went, and both of us were oblivious. So here we are.
Yeah,
success.
exactly. If anything, now we've just known that every road looks different. So ours, while bumpy, is still getting through. So
Yeah,
I think I'm okay with it.
Profound quotes. There will be, no doubt, there will be more. I used that Winston Churchill quote about success being jumping from failure to failure without loss of enthusiasm.
Yep.
It's one of the greatest quotes ever because of this idea of loss of enthusiasm. Because, it's how do you respond to that quote? Because for me, like that phrase, loss of enthusiasm, I mean, does that make us masochists?
No. I love the quote, and I love it because it really showcases the fact that it's okay to be excited, but also it's really kind of an exercise in perseverance, and it's an exercise in mindset, and it's an exercise in being comfortable with the concept of failure. Because I think too often most of us are like, failure, ooh, no thank you. Like, I don't want to be associated with that. But I think for me, I grew up with the last name Faill. And so you kind of have to develop some sense of, we'll just call it respect for the concept of failure in order to just kind of get through life, right? I heard it always from friends, from family. Hope you don't fail this class. Hope you don't fail that, right? And I've always heard that. And so I think it builds in some, some thick skin and vulnerability and thick skin and, just a wherewithal to roll with the punches. And that's what I love to do. I love to be able to take difficult subjects like failure and imposter syndrome and the work that I do with colleges and universities. I do a lot of vulnerability and masculinity work too. And so I like to take those very difficult, like, I don't want to talk about it, and make them make sense on a more human level. Because if we understand that failure is just a part of life, then maybe we'll talk about it more. And so the failure to failure without having the loss of enthusiasm, that's everything. We always wanted to, like for those of us able to walk, we wanted to walk. And so we fell down. We didn't lose enthusiasm. We might have felt maybe disgruntled or bruised, either ego or physically, but we still wanted to be able to walk, or we wanted to be able to write, or we wanted to be able to do whatever. And so there's a drive, an inherent drive that exists in the human nature. And I think that's really kind of what that quote speaks to is, do you have it in you enough to continue to perceive? And that's kind of what we'll talk about it in the phases of failure stuff in a little bit. But I think that there's a passion that gets ignited that makes you okay with failure, and then sharing it, which is really fun.
I love that little anecdote. And, talking about children learning to walk, right? They don't give up. Can you imagine if like, it's like, I'm out. I'm just going to crawl for the rest of my life. Thanks very much. I mean, like, done.
Some of my favorite videos, and this was given to me from a friend not long ago, but have you ever seen a baby giraffe walk? It is an exercise in absolute hilarity.
Yeah, because the legs are like
they just don't know what to do. And so again, like most animals, they're born and not able to walk immediately. They stumble, they fall, and we as human beings are very similar, that we stumble through life, but for some odd reason we've got that voice in the back of our mind that doesn't want to allow us to share those failures for fear of then not being seen as successful, which just doesn't make sense.
I'm smiling because, picturing the baby giraffe, in South Africa, we used to say, like, if we were like kind of, just shading someone, we would say that they had Wednesday legs. Wednesday gonna break. So baby giraffes have kind of Wednesday legs, right? They look like they're going to snap at any point in time. But yeah, I mean, we're going to come back to kids in a way, because the quote of the day is related to someone who really has picked up on the power, that we can learn from children and all the things that we lose in society as we grow older. But it's time to get to a little segment that I call Fun Facts, which if you watch this show, you know that there are going to be some interesting fun facts. Now, one that you didn't share with me is the fact that it looks like you've been in, from what I can see, a bunch of commercials, which I haven't put in here, but that was interesting. Mentos, I don't know if that was just a bit of product placement or...
So the Mentos, that was my I think it was my junior or senior year of high school. I always had Mentos on me, and so like people, like I'm pretty sure my parents had to go to Costco to just buy the giant jumbo packs because I would go through like a pack a day, but mostly because people knew that I always had them. And so like senior portraits or whatever, it was school photo day, and so I was like, can I pose with this? And I had an empty wrapper. Oh, there it is right there. Yep. Uh, had an empty wrapper and was like, there we go. And then like, fun little fact, I sent that photo to Mentos, like, because again, like email wasn't really a thing at that point in time. And so I sent it to Mentos, and then they sent me a box of their product.
As they
like
should.
Thanks for supporting. And a friend of mine found this not long ago and sent it to me. I'd forgotten all about it.
And then how it started, how it's going. So now HelloFresh, you're I think I'm gonna, I don't know, I'm gonna try and do a little bit of what can I see, product placement around me, and just
No, this one. Well, so fun fact about that experience with HelloFresh. So my son is actually very involved in his own acting world and is represented by an incredible agency. And over the course of the pandemic, they wanted to cast more families, just because there's if you're testing one, you're testing all. And so we said that like, hey, our family is vaccinated. My ex-wife is vaccinated. My daughter and my son is obviously with the agency and vaccinated. And they were like, great, we need a father-son duo for this HelloFresh commercial. Are you free? And I was like, this is going to be the coolest experience to be able to be alongside my son in this commercial. And it was great. It was a day of filming, absolutely phenomenal. And I remember talking to him, I think it was like a week or so later. And I was like, hey, like, buddy, and my son's about to turn 11. I was like, hey, buddy, like, that was so much fun. Like, that's going to be a great memory for me for the rest of my life. And hopefully with you. He was like, yeah, it was okay.
And he's like, you can never, ever be in a commercial with me again.
Yeah, and I usually take him to set, like I'm the set dad, and just kind of hanging out, and I make him go around and say thank you to everybody and all that. But he was just like, yeah, just another day on the job. It's like, okay, all right, dear 10-year-old.
Well, it's great. It's great in the sense to see that both of you essentially live on set. I mean, you perform on a stage, he performs on a set. And you've had, when we go back and we look into your deep, dark, sordid past, we see things like, for example, your first kiss and subsequent 2 kisses were all in theater productions. And this is the best part. Immediately following your first kiss, I fell off stage, or you fell off stage into a tuba. Now, we actually found a photo of this, and this was about the best we could do. But how does somebody actually fall into a tuba?
Oh my God. Okay, so I was a theater nerd growing up, and so I was awkward. I had like giant glasses and braces and everything, and then my sophomore year of high school got those off, and I felt like a little bit more confident, and so I went out for one of the theater productions of The Music Man. And I'm 6'2". I'm a bigger presence on stage. And so they were like, well, you can't be the lead because that's for senior. You can't be the best friend because you upstage the lead just based off height alone, but you'd be a great bad guy. And I was like, I'm more comedic relief than a bad guy, but sure. And then I found out that in The Music Man, the bad guy, Charlie County, the anvil salesman, I can't believe that just came back to me. Like Marion, the lead actress, like pulls him in, kisses him, and then like throws him aside just to like shut him up and get rid of him. Well, the stage that I was on was a converted barn from like way back in the day. And so the stage risers that are there were off to the side, and she pulls me in and is supposed to kiss me and throw me upstage. Now, keep in mind, it's 10th grade, high school. The awkwardness of puberty and growing up is already abound. But the word got out that this was my first kiss. This is also 2 or 3 days before opening night. And the director was like, I need to see this. And I was like, can we just pretend again? And so everyone heard that this was happening and came from backstage and like moved into the audience to watch me have my first kiss. She kisses me, and I get so like tongue-tied, pun, that I don't go upstage. I actually end up going downstage. The problem is that there was no downstage. That was the orchestra pit. And so I fell off the stage into the orchestra pit, into a tuba in front of everyone. So that was my first kiss. And then several months later was in another production, and my second and third also were.
But no tuba. So,
No.
at least there must have been a standing ovation, no doubt, right?
It's the progressive wins, right? You never get it right the first time, but you just end up getting there after a while.
I love that story, and from moments where a picture can say 1,000 words and where no words are necessary, it also turns out that you are an international acting champion. This was very hard to kind of like put paint, so I just went with this in the category of mime and group mime. So tell us about how and I think you know what's coming next. And by the way, we didn't chat before in the green room, but you will be required to perform. And I'm not asking you to perform as a mime, but how has mime in particular helped you in this field of being a keynote public speaker?
Great question. So, and I'll answer that by giving a little bit of another story. And so I went into college as an acting theater major. That was where I thought I wanted to go. And I remember my freshman year teacher, who was going to become my advisor, said that I would never make it on the silver screen. I would never make it on TV or anything because my eyebrows were way too expressive. And at 17 years old, I was like, but you teach at college, so like, what do you know? And I changed my major to one that was probably better suited for me in the long run, which was communication studies. But that experience in high school, so again, it was a high school theater group, and we went to the regional and national. And I think for me, what helped is not only acting in a theater in high school, but then also you have to exaggerate a little more. You have to own your space. And I've always kind of talked with my hands and owned, and I don't stand behind a podium when I speak because I want to feel like there's a connection with the audience. And miming, I never thought I'd have to explain this. Miming actually makes you more aware, but it also makes you tell a story without being able to say anything. So you have to be able to, like have your cup. You have to be able to like, what are you drinking? And so that makes your brain understand not only space, but then like, how do you share that story? And I think for me, it also ingrained that stories are incredibly important. Our stories connect us, good, bad, anything. And so, excuse me, the ability to craft a good message on stage that people liked so much that you're then like awarded multiple different kind of national championships. That's just a fun one. And that's one where being able to do it solo was interesting. I realized that being able to do miming as a group or even pantomiming as a group is challenging, because then you're reliant on other people to also do it. So it was a transformative experience. I'm glad that you didn't find the photo of me in my mime, because that's somewhere on my Instagram, I'm sure. But yeah, I think.
Hang on, no.
But wait, there's more.
Well, there's more. But well, I want to say that there are a couple of things that I find really, really interesting. One is you can imagine you're guest number 399. There've been a number of guests who have done improv, who have used improv, who have built their speaking careers around improv. You're the first mime. You're the first person that talks about a skill set. It's almost like when we give our kids advice in terms of which courses to, especially in a liberal arts environment, which courses, trust me, you need to do this course, right? And they ignore us again, of course. But in thinking of improv and mime, these are two components that I think can make for the kind of training. The other thing is, and I've learned this now a little bit, I actually auditioned for a local production of Mamma Mia a few years ago, ended up getting into the ensemble, and I didn't go ahead with it just because of schedule and all my travel. But it was amazing to me how almost over the top you have to be when running your lines.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
it's the same thing even in an environment of being a talk show host, is you have to almost go over the top.
Yeah.
And emphasize your words. And it seems almost gratuitous, but when you watch it back, you actually see how much extra energy is needed in order to really kind of, pop or land with your
And
audience.
that's similar to being on a stage. I think we've all seen speakers that no matter how famous, if they're not engaging and if they're just very monotone as they share their stories, this is not something that necessarily, it could be a great message, but it doesn't always mean that it's going to sink in, because it might not resonate. And if it's not resonating and we just are speaking in this monotone way, it does no one any good. And I think to that point of having to go extra, from a stage, and I did, again, like I mentioned, I did musical theater, and I never saw myself as a singer until my theater professor, Frida Ramsey, all these names are coming back. But she was like, no, you've got a solo in Oliver. And I was like, I don't sing, like I can't read sheet music. But it's incredible the amount of like self-limiting beliefs that we all have, that it's like, well, I could never do that. And from failure to acting to taking a stage to even just day-to-day life, it's fascinating to see the lessons that we could learn. But I think that often we don't want to or want to even reflect on to be able to be a little bit better tomorrow than we are today.
Now I'm smiling because I was in Oliver too, believe it or not. And I just brought this back from South Africa at the Baxter Theatre. So I did not have a solo, but I enjoyed, I enjoyed. It's so weird because I actually on the flight now, I went to ask for some more red wine, and I said, can I have some more? And then the flight attendant said, more? You want more? And I was like, what is going on? By the way,
world.
I know Glenn says, me too, I was Fagin. And John Ruan is here, and he said, hi, Joe, thanks for the invite. Good to see you. Facebook's changed their whole page. Like I could actually invite people to this, which was kind of awesome. All right. So we are definitely gearing up to talk about imposters and failure. But before we do, there is just one more little bit of tidbit that you need to know about Dan Faill, which is we know that he mimes, we know he tubers, we know he kisses, we know about all of that. But did you know that in fact his Chewbacca and Kermit impressions are pretty top notch? There is. I am actually going to do a I'm not going to let you do this alone, because I also pride myself on my Chewbacca and Kermit impressions. Not as good as you, but I'm prepared to back you up. So let's have a little bit of Chewie first of all.
All right. So what's great is that I remember being at Disneyland and the Chewie was there. And so my son went to take a picture and I was like, all right, everyone, say and it actually got Chewbacca, the character, to crack up. And so that felt like a good win for me.
As opposed to like smoking the cigarette going, hey, buddy, back off. This is my gig.
Yeah, exactly.
So I've tried to do it, but now I'm probably like...
There was at one point on a May the 4th, there was like a Chewbacca contest. Now I didn't win, which I feel and I don't remember who won.
Imagine you and me in the final. I'm gonna actually do the rest of this. Right now, people are watching on Facebook going, "What the hell is this? The ETH merge, the two brains?"
That's so. As not necessarily a blockchain NFT guy, I own some, but that doesn't mean I know what in the world I'm doing.
Yeah,
that's what the merge sounds like. That's what most of it sounds like to
me. Exactly. All right. What about Kermit the Frog?
That was a good one.
I would say that's a very good Kermit the Frog. It's more of I think, it's just a matter of what we are able to do.
Things that I never thought I would be doing on the show.
Well, here's what you are about to do. You're about to sing, Someday We'll Find It, The Rainbow Connection, The Lovers and Dreamers, and Me, with me. So are you ready?
No.
All right, I'll let you off. But it goes something like, someday we'll find it.
A
rainbow
connection
for
for
lovers
lovers
and
and
dreamers
dreamers and
me.
And we have literally
Crowd goes
just
wild.
hit 0 people watching us as well. But all right, we've gone from the sublime to the ridiculous. Now let's head back to sublime. You know, I mean, I think part of why I've done the show the way I have, which is going from these, it is kind of manic, right? Like in Greg Gow to impressions, to talking about imposter syndrome and failures, is the essence of giving ourselves grace, is being able to sometimes be serious, but also not take ourselves too seriously. And, you know, I've had a ton of people on the show talking about failure. But when you've had 400 people on the show and somebody comes with something original, that gets my attention. And so I know one of the things you wanted to talk about is the phases of failure. Let's, you know, I mean, we've all heard like fear is false evidence appearing real. Let's talk about failure and the fact that you actually have been able to segment, which I think quite brilliantly, the different aspects. So I would love a little masterclass from Dan Faill on
no, let's lean in. Yeah, no, thank you. And so I jokingly tell people that I'm excited to help you live up to my last name. And usually when people are like, all right, what's your first name? Okay, great, Dan. And last name? And I say Faill. And then they're just like, did you mean to say Faill? I'm like, no, but with 2 L's, because I go twice as hard. But I think I'm of the opinion that we don't share enough of ourselves, of our stories, of being, you know, not only open and vulnerable, but being able to flip the script. And that's why I said earlier that I like to take difficult subjects and make them more relatable, because I think that more people would talk about it then. And so looking at the overall kind of phases of failure itself, I put failure at the top. I think we should all strive for failure. I think businesses should want to fail more. I think that individuals should want to try to fail more. I think groups, organizations, we all need to reframe the way that we look at it. And so that's why failure is at the top. And I'll get to that in a minute, but just to kind of give the brief kind of build up, I think most of the world is built on, and most good relationships, no one's gonna say good relationships, are built on this concept of vulnerability. And thankfully, we've had scholars like Dr. Brene Brown and others lead in, and it's become much more of a more talked about subject, because if we tried to do this even as 5 years, 6 years ago, I think people would have been like, vulnerability, like that's just no, like I don't need to be vulnerable. That's not the case. And I think vulnerability can be very easy. I got a buddy of mine who's a fellow speaker, James Robalata, and he says that if vulnerability is a weakness, then why is it so hard? And I think that's an amazing way to think about this, because vulnerability can connect us, right? I had a feeling you were going to share some of those interesting stories. I didn't know we were going to go all in. But that's an exercise in vulnerability.
That's your punishment for coming late to the green room, by the way.
Great. Duly noted if we ever have me back.
Or your reward. Or your reward.
There we go.
We were both vulnerable.
Exactly. Well, but that's part of it, is being able to acknowledge that life happens, is to be able to acknowledge that I don't have my stuff together, right? Like it's okay. And so I think for us, that ability to share on a vulnerable level is where we build from, right? Vulnerability is saying, I don't have all the answers. Vulnerability is saying, I'm not sure what this is, but I can look into it. Vulnerability is an exercise in human connectedness. And so how do we create kind of safe spaces, or how do we create brave spaces to be able to share that? Now, again, my profession as a professional speaker, I share vulnerable stories from the stage all the time, but I do it in a hopes that people can see how easy it is. And then I don't have to share the deepest, darkest moment, but I do share some of those deep, dark moments in a way that doesn't also feel preachy. It doesn't feel in a way that makes someone feel less than. My hope is that it connects us. Now, when you say that you don't know it all, I think that kind of leads into this like, okay, well, what don't I know? And that kind of leads us to the next level of creativity. Now think about, so Joseph, think about it. When do you feel most creative? Like, what is there a time of day? Is there something that you're doing or not doing? When are those moments where you feel the most creative?
Yeah, there are unique moments, yeah, and I'm not going to give you the obvious one, which is in the shower. For me, generally, it's right after I wake up,
Mhm.
where suddenly I'm like, I need to write down all these thoughts popping in my head. I got to email this person.
Mhm.
It's sometimes on a run, but there are generally moments of solitude when I'm alone,
Exactly.
alone with myself,
Mhm.
alone with my thoughts, and I embrace that. Whereas some people go mad when they're alone with their thoughts.
Totally. Well, and this fun little device is now part of what's just taking that attention away.
Right.
You know, I joke with others. I live in Los Angeles, and so I joke that like Hollywood is just retelling stories because we've lost some creativity, and we've lost some of that because I think we've become comfortable, and we've just, rather than zoning out, we'll zone out on this instead, which has been designed to keep your attention. So when you know, for any, you know, listeners, viewers, when are you able to find times to be alone and alone with your thoughts? And that's a scary place, and that's okay. For me, I had some thoughts. I actually came up with this concept like in the shower, and I was like, I have had other great ideas in the shower and they have gone down the drain. So what I've ended up doing is I've actually got a notepad that like, it's like a wax lined paper notepad in my shower that's like suction cup to the wall. And in that like notepad, I've also got a pencil. And so I'll write different ideas down. And so being able to think about new ideas. Can you go on a run and not listen to a podcast? Or maybe you're one of those, and I love brainstorming with people. So if we can create a no agenda meeting, hear me out, a no agenda meeting where it's like literally no idea is off the table. What are things that we could do? What are different ways that we could process? I think finding those moments to be creative and finding those times either during the day, whether you wake up, because I go to bed and my brain is still running and I'm like, oh, that's a really good idea. I'll write it down in the morning. And as soon as I go to bed, it's gone. Finding ways to keep track, finding ways to be bored. And I think we've lost that art of being bored. You know, my kids are more on their phone than they are outside playing with a stick of what everything could be. And so I think finding different opportunities for us to do that is important.
Before you go on, I just want to say the concept of a no agenda meeting is quite brilliant. And you know, I think even if I internalize that now, doing these collective cafe virtual coffees, I come prepared with an idea. But what we've decided, even organically in the past few weeks, is that on Friday it's kind of potluck, it's potpourri. It's essentially, I'm not calling it that, but I'm now going to call it that with deference and respect and attribution to you, a no agenda Friday, which is just come with ideas and thoughts and randomness. And, you know, let's lean into our, into our neurodiversity, or even try and be more neurodiverse if we aren't. If we're neurotypical, then let's try and be less typical on a Friday. So
exactly.
I really love that. And I'm also, just as a natural pause here, the quote that I found for you, it's perfect to bring out right now, because I don't normally reveal who it's from before I actually show the quote. But this is the late Sir Ken Robinson, who believed very strongly in the power of curiosity and creativity, and specifically from an education standpoint, how it's all in our kids, and how the education system fails them and fails us by stripping it out of them. It's kind of full circle with your work in colleges. So this is the quote: "If you're not prepared to be wrong, you'll never come up with anything original." And I just love how, in a way, what he was doing was bringing together failure and creativity. I didn't even realize that until you sent the pyramid. And so perfect timing. So I wanted to show that, and then bring us, you know, straight back to, I don't know if you want to comment on that, but otherwise let's just keep rolling, because this is amazing.
Well, and I think to that point, right? So if you're not willing to be wrong, again, that's an exercise in vulnerability, then you're not going to be creative. Again, that's the level 2. When you are creative, when you have that great idea, rarely do we keep it to ourselves. So that next kind of what made sense for me was obvious, which was, let's lean into passion. Because when you have a great fun thing that you're like, hey, this could be really cool. Like, I came up with this concept and I ran it by some friends. I was like, hey, what do you think? And they were like, this is good. And so that got me more excited. That got me passionate about what I wanted to do. And like, I was like, well, now I guess I'll really lean into my last name a little bit more, because I had fought it as a speaker for a little bit, for a decade. And really was like, oh, this can be something that's got tangible legs to it because I'm passionate about it. And so that passion starts to create that community of other people, because again, you're going to tell others and hopefully they'll spread the word. And then you've got this great support network, kind of like you've created on Discord. And even with this community of like, what does it look like to be more creative via passion and to get people on board?
It's also, by the way, interesting that, you know, your connection, again, it's another, that's why I'm so happy that you're finally on the show, because you know, when you, it's the opposite of keeping your cards, you know, to yourself, right? To go back to the soliloquy, you know, not sharing your hand, holding, keeping your deck close to, you know, to your chest. But the world doesn't operate that way anymore in terms of embargoes and NDAs. And it's almost this idea of the more passionate you are, the more you want to share. And the more you share, the more ultimately creative you're going to be and the more ideas you're going to have. And if you believe and subscribe into the fact that it's a never-ending factory of creativity, then there's no more fear about someone stealing your idea.
But too often we don't share either for fear of being judged, or when we share, it's our closest friends, it's our family that are like, really? Like, are you sure that this is what you wanted? Like, I care about you, so I don't want to see you fail. And it's like, no, like this is something, like I took a leap 5 years ago to go full-time speaking. And that was scary. And I remember I had family and friends being like, are you sure? Like, this is not a thing. And I will be participating in your book of what the pandemic did to me. Because as a professional public speaker with no public during the midst of a pandemic, Joseph, I curled up in fetal position on my couch for a majority of it because I didn't know what to do anymore. And that's because I thought that I was just a speaker, and there's so much more to that. So again, like that passion, so to come back to it, so you've got passion. And then when I'm passionate about something, if I don't know how to do it, then I'm going to want to learn more. And so if I'm learning about how to do something, I can start to then realize, oh, wow, I really didn't know anything about this subject. And then you're going to realize that you're going to fail, and that's okay. And so then kind of the process can start all over with like, well, now that I've realized that I failed in this when I'm learning about it and tried it, but I'm still passionate about it, I've still got my support group, then I'm going to try it a different way. And then I'm going to share hopefully some of these failures, which again, the exercise in vulnerability. Now you'll notice it's outlined, and it's outlined by this concept of safety, because I don't think we will ever be truly vulnerable or honest with ourselves or others unless we feel safe. Now, I mean physically safe and psychologically safe. We will never go to our boss with a brand new idea if we think we're going to get fired for it. We will never go to our friends if they're going to if they immediately tend to like downplay or really kind of like, pardon the language, but shit on our ideas. And so we'll never be truly open and vulnerable unless we feel safe. Companies, organizations need to create this concept of safety to know that like, if you've got a new way that we could do stuff, bring it up, let's try. And I think that ability, because again, companies are like, it's a bottom dollar piece. Let's say some companies are like, it's a bottom dollar. We will never try anything new for fear of affecting our bottom dollar. But the companies that are most successful try, and they open up the doors for people to try.
I had a client, I mean, in my pre-pandemic life, I was a consultant. I've now, part of my own growth and my forever change is to give up consulting and focus now on this new world of mine, being a talk show host. But one of my clients was AB InBev. And I remember we did an innovation award show that we created and customized and led internally. But I wanted to push them and actually have we called it like the Failies, actually a series of awards for failures. Biggest risk taken, biggest learning. We flipped it, right? Instead of biggest learning and even have the biggest fail. And they wanted to buy but they couldn't
Mhm.
because of the fear.
Yeah.
Because of the fear that it wouldn't land well. But
Mhm.
we were so close to actually, creating a culture where people would want to win that award, to be
Mhm.
able to demonstrate that they were being recognized for taking the chance.
And so what's funny that you bring that up, there's an association that I volunteer with and I speak at their conference. And I approached them and I was like, hey, look, I'd had a really good year speaking a few years ago. And I was like, I want to give back to this association. I want to create a fund, but I don't want to call it the Faill Fund, because I don't know that other people would want to donate to the fund to grow it. So they ended up calling it an innovation fund. And that innovation fund, from the seed money that I gave, within the first year, I think they raised like an extra $100,000. And I just started it with like this little piddly amount. But I knew that because again, innovation means you're willing to try something new. And so that fund goes to help not only their own educational program as an association, but people can tap into that fund for like newer innovative ideas and programs. And that's what I value, is that ability for people to try the like harebrained idea. And it's like, think about all the design architectures and think about all the things in the world that they look odd. It's weird in the moment, but really could be an incredible opportunity to change not only perspective, and this is cheesy, but like it could change someone's life. It could change someone's environment. It could change a lot. So that's why I love doing what I do.
And this quote really, it really kind of got my attention. Everyone fails at something. It's so true. And when you're like, well, you show me someone who's never failed or failed at anything, and I'll show you the ultimate imposter, because they've actually succeeded even at being an imposter.
Totally.
So congratulations on that. I also I'm reminded by that amazing quote from earlier today, where you said, if vulnerability was such a weakness, why would it be so hard? Why is it so hard? Because one would think weakness comes naturally. It's easy to be weak.
Yeah.
You don't have to work hard your entire life to be weak. And it just flips everything on its head. It's actually Wellness Wednesday, and we're going to go to Whitney Lawrence in a moment with her segment. But I did want to ask you this question, which is, I want to create the bridge between imposter syndrome and failure, specifically because I love the quote: the only people that don't suffer from imposter syndrome are imposters. And if that's true, and it is that everyone fails at something, how do you draw the connection between imposter syndrome and ultimately the concept of failure?
Again, and this is where, I'm a single guy, and so I'm on some dating apps, and my favorite thing is when, I see someone, it's like, I really want someone with their shit together. And I'm like, boo-boo, ain't nobody got it together. Right? Like, we all have stuff going on. And so being able to look at and being honest with ourselves is incredibly hard. The mirror is the hardest place for us to look and acknowledge that we've got work to do. And so I think where I make the connection is a fear of failure is a part of life, right? We all have that. There was a study done not long ago that 70% of people in the US suffer from imposter syndrome. I'm of the opinion that the other 30% just don't know that it's called that. Because imposter syndrome is this, right? Like, is this little voice in the back of our minds, right? Like, I think it's this little thing of like, why are you in this job? Like, you got hired for the job, but like, why are you in this job? You don't belong in this job. Someone's going to find out you're a fraud. And what's fascinating is that imposter syndrome can show up differently for different people based on our own lived experiences and privilege of society, et cetera. But then also imposter syndrome, fun fact, isn't real at all. Imposter syndrome is a collection of different feelings that shows up for everyone differently. Maybe it's anxiety, maybe it's fear, maybe it's whatever, belonging and not belonging, right? There's so many different ways, because imposter syndrome is not diagnosable, right? Like, it's not something that I could go to my therapist and they're like, oh, let me give you a prescription for imposter syndrome. That's not a thing. And so once we start to acknowledge that it's not something, and it's really a lot of just like the square foot that's up here for us, then we can start to like transform it. So I'll give you a quick example, because I know we have to go. Jiminy Cricket. Right? Thankfully, with the new release of Pinocchio, Jiminy Cricket's going to come back, so it doesn't feel like an old, like I'm that old. But Jiminy Cricket was the positive voice of reason, was the conscience for Pinocchio in that story. I'm of the opinion that we all have the positive Jiminy Cricket and the negative Jiminy Cricket. Now, I like to draw, I like to doodle, and so I'll actually pull up my I have Post-it notes everywhere, but I have named my imposter syndrome. So I want to introduce to you all Jimmy Cockroach.
Jimmy Cockroach. Hold on a second. Let's go.
So Jimmy Cockroach is right here, and Jimmy Cockroach, and I don't know why, and my apologies for anyone that might be up in Jersey, but for some odd reason, Jimmy Cockroach shows up for me, and he's still on a regular basis like, I don't know what you're doing, I don't know why you got booked for this keynote, nobody's gonna book you. Like, he sounds like a 70-year-old smoker from Jersey, and I don't know why. But when I hear that voice and when I see that image of some like he's supposed to have it all together because he's like, look at me, I fit in with my top hat, but he's flipping everybody off and he looks mangy. Like, for me, Jimmy Cockroach is ridiculous. Just like the voice that says we're not good enough. Just like the voice that says, why are you here? And you question yourself, the self-doubt. That's a Jimmy Cockroach. And so if I can hear it in his voice, and if I can see it, you know, based off that image, then I can realize that, like, okay, great. If I'm driving my car of thoughts, I'm not going to give Jimmy Cockroach the wheel, right? I'm going to put him in the back seat, maybe the trunk. But like, you can't say, well, just don't listen to it. That's toxic positivity at its best. Just think positive thought. That's not how you do it. You can acknowledge it and you can say like, that's interesting. That's an interesting thought. I want to unpack this at some point. Now's not the right moment because I'm focused on whatever the task at hand is. So being able to understand like success, who defines success? Failures are successes. And so being able to look at that and being able to really understand that this is what can control how you show up, how you fail, how you are vulnerable with someone else. And so being able to have those experiences are incredibly
and it goes back to defining what winning looks like, which is, you know, Greg Gow. I mean, it's full circle.
Exactly.
The other thing I was going to say is, you know, imposter syndrome ultimately is, you know, as you were saying, the fear of failure. And but with failure, with learning, with imposter syndrome, with regret, another Dan Pink, what we realize is we don't sweep it under the rug. We don't pretend it doesn't exist. We acknowledge it, we meet it, and then we move forward, and we don't let it take us down or overpower us or suffocate us. And so I think that's a great reconciliation between the imposter syndrome. Recognize it, you know, almost embrace it just for a brief moment, and then realize, guess what? Everyone fails at something.
Exactly.
So I have to tell you, we'll go to Whitney, you know, to kind of give us again the safety. I love that concept of safety, but I've decided now that the second L is for learning. I was wondering. So now there you go. Dan Faill with 2 L's. The second L.
I think in some keynotes I've said failures are intentional learning lessons, right? Like there's the five letters. But yes, it's a lot. It's opportunities.
Right. At least the L's not for loser. And even and even so, again, it's up to you to define what winning and losing looks like. So Whitney is going to bring us home, and then we'll come back to wrap it up. This is her segment for Wellness Wednesday.
Today's tip comes from something interesting I learned during a recent therapy session. I was explaining to my psychologist that I'm in a little bit of a stressful situation and I want to hire somebody to help me resolve it. I did some research and I landed on this one person that I thought would be a really good fit for helping me work through this issue. But this person was about double more expensive than I thought they were going to be based on estimates for this type of support. And I was stressed out because I felt like I needed to do more work to research somebody else to try to find a better rate that was in alignment with my expectations. And my therapist said, well, how about if you think about how much time it would take you to research and find somebody else, and take that amount of time and multiply it by your hourly rate. And you may find out that the time it would take you to do more research would cost you the time that you could spend on something else making that same amount of money. So it actually would work out to be about the same amount of spend, when you counter in your time. And I thought, wow, that is such an interesting perspective shift. Sometimes we spend so much time and energy trying to fix something, to try to find a better solution. But maybe the first option that we choose is actually the best option because it takes us less time and effort to just decide upon it versus looking for something that might potentially be better, or it might not. We never know if doing research or looking for someone else, whether we're interviewing someone, whether we're looking for someone romantically, whether we're trying to find something in life that could be better than what we already have, that could save us more money. But what about the time and energy that it would take for something we're not even guaranteed to be better? That was a good shift for me to make and ended up reducing a lot of my stress and helping me make a decision. So I'm curious if it could help do the same for you too.
Well, it's clear that what she should have done was just hire Dan Faill. I mean, it's a bit of a no-brainer, but it's you get what you pay for, I guess. And you know, I love a little bit of wisdom that actually says, you know, we could probably eliminate, again, certain degree, I would say, of anxiety by sometimes going with our gut and realizing, you know, and realizing that, I guess, you know, Dan, our most prized asset and scarcest resource is always going to be time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love that. Well, and it's an investment, right? To invest in yourself or to invest in what you believe in is incredible. And I think that there was power. I'm sitting here thinking like, yes, all of what she said. Mm-hmm. Like, where do I spend time? Because that's where you're going to show. That's where you're going to show up most.
Well, I'm looking at all those happy clients and on your website. And by the way, if you want to find out, Dan, I don't say this gratuitously, but you know, I used to say it to every one of my guests that this was the best guest I've ever had, which is always great because you're always tomorrow's will be the best guest. But I have to say that what I really do appreciate, I won't say that. What I will say is that some of the most, I think, original thoughts and builds to someone who has seen 399 different takes on grit, adversity, leadership, creativity, collaboration, etc. And I really, it was worth the fight.
Thank you. Yes, I agree.
Not that we fought, we didn't fight, but it was also
the schedule's fault. Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, I'll say that as I just put a couple of different ways that you can connect and follow Dan, is that coming into, I think it was Andy Enriquez's Clubhouse room, which is where I saw you. Clubhouse for me has just been an amazing source to hear people, because ultimately there's nothing more of an authentic verification of intellect, of skill, of talent than a voice. And so I've loved, even though I'm a public speaker myself, I've never jumped onto stage or even wanted. I've always enjoyed sitting in the audience and listening to specifically the pros and getting to know them on my terms and get to know them in this safe environment. You may not have thought it was safe based on forcing you to do Chewbacca or Kermit impersonations. But trust me, it will never be forgotten. In fact, it will be remembered because it will be part of the next edit of my show intro. So
Great.
Very Machiavellian, very, very Jedi.
Well done. Well done. You know, it's an exercise in vulnerability is what I will call that.
And it was well played. You are as masterful with your impersonations as you are with your leadership and your learnings and your insights. I know Chuck Norris was impressed and appreciated you very much.
You are Chuck Norris approved.
And we will be back tomorrow. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
I love it.
Thank you for watching the show about hope, positivity, optimism, and if there's time left over, a little bit of marketing with your host, multiple author, and global keynote speaker, Joseph Jaffe. If you like the show, tell a friend or two. Please subscribe to the show, and if you want to get inside news, previews of upcoming guests, and much more, visit josephjaffe.com/subscribe to sign up for the show's newsletter.
And despite the best ministrations of your wife, you still look ugly.